Pilgrims to the Pecos by Robert Howard. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Pilgrims to the Pecos by Robert Howard. That there wagon rolled up the trail and stopped in front of our cabin one morning just after sunup. We all come out to see who it was, because strangers ain't common on Bear Creek, and not very often welcome neither. They was a long, hungry-looking old coot driving, and 4 or 5 growed boys sticking their heads out. "Good morning, folks," said the old coot, taking off his hat. "My name is Joshua Richardson. I'm heading a wagon train of immigrants which is looking for a place to settle. The rest of 'em's camped 3 miles back down the trail. Everybody we met in these here Humboldt Mountings told us we'd have to see Mr. Roaring Bill Elkins about settling hereabouts. Be you him?" "I'm Bill Elkins," says Pap suspiciously. "Well, Mr. Elkins," says Old Man Richardson, wagging his chin whiskers, "we'd admire it powerful if you folks would let us people settle somewheres about." Says Pap, pulling his beard. "Whar you all from?" "Kansas," says Old Man Richardson. "Wichita," says Pap. "Get my shotgun." "Don't you do no such thing, Watchy," says Ma. "Don't be stubborn, William. The war's been over for years." "That's what I say," hastily spoke up Old Man Richardson. "Let bygones be bygones, I says." "What," says Pap ominously, "is your honest opinion of General Sterling Price?" "One of nature's noblemen," declares Old Man Richardson earnestly. Says Pap. "You seem to have considerable tact and hoss sense for a red leg, but they ain't no more room on Bear Creek for no more settlers, even if they was Democrats. They's 9 or 10 families now within a retch of 100 square miles, and I don't believe in overcrowding a country." "But we're plumb tuckered out," wailed Old Man Richardson, "and nowheres to go. We have been driv from pillar to post by settlers which got here ahead of us and grabbed all the best land. They claims it whether they got any legal rights or not." "Legal rights be damned!" snorted Pap. "Shotgun rights is what goes in this country. But I know just the place for you. It's 10 or 15 days' travel from here in Arizony. It's called Bowie Knife Canyon, and it's just right for farming people, which I jedge you all to be." "We be," says Old Man Richardson, "but how we gonna get there?" "My son Breckenridge will be plumb delighted to guide you there," says Pap. "Won't you, Breckenridge?" "No, I won't," I said. "Why the tarnation have I got to be picked on to ride herd on a passel of tender-footed mavericks?" "He'll get you there safe," says Pap, ignoring my remarks. "He dotes on lending folks a helping hand. Don't you, Breckenridge?" Seeing the futility of argument, I merely snarled and went to saddle Captain Kidd. I noticed Old Man Richardson and his boys looking at me in a very peculiar manner all the time, and when I come out on Captain Kidd, him snorting and bucking and kicking the rails out of the corral like he always does, they turned kind of pale, and Old Man Richardson said, "I wouldn't want to impose on your son, Mr. Elkins. After all, we wasn't intending to go to that there canyon in the first place." "I'm guiding you to Bowie Knife Canyon," I roared. "Maybe you warn't going there before I saddled my hoss, but you air now. Come on." I then cut loose under the mule's feet with my .45s to kind of put some ginger in the critters, and they brayed and sawed off down the trail, just hitting the high places, with Old Man Richardson hanging onto the lines and bouncing all over the seat, and his sons rolling in the wagon bed. We come into the camp full tilt, and some of the men grabbed their guns, and the women hollered and jerked up their kids, and one feller was so excited he fell into a big pot of beans which was simmering over a fire, and squalled out that the Injuns was trying to burn him alive. Old man Richardson had his feet braced agin the front gate, pulling back on the lines as hard as he could, and yelling bloody murder. But the mules had the bits betwixt their teeth, so I rode to their heads and grabbed them by the bridles and throwed 'em back onto their haunches. And old man Richardson ought to have knew that the stop would be sudden. 'Twarn't my fault he done a dive off the seat and hit on the wagon tongue on his head. And it weren't my fault neither that one of the mules kicked him and t'other'n bit him before I could untangle him from amongst them. Mules is mean critters, howsoever you take 'em. Everybody hollered amazin', and he riz up and mopped the blood off of his face and waved his arms and hollered, "Calm down, everybody. This ain't nothin' to git excited about. This gentleman is Mr. Breckenridge Elkins, which has kindly agreed to guide us to a land of milk and honey down in Arizony." They received the news without enthusiasm. They was about 50 of them, mostly women, children, and half-grown young'uns. They weren't more'n a dozen fit fighting men in the train. They all looked like they'd been on the trail a long time, and they was all some kin to old man Richardson, sons and daughters, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, their husbands and wives, and such like. They was one real pretty gal, the old man's youngest daughter Betty, who warn't yet married. They'd jest et breakfast and was hitched up when we arrove, so we pulled out without no more delay. I rode along of old man Richardson's wagon, which went ahead with the others strung out behind, and he says to me, "If this here Bowie Knife Canyon is such a remarkable place, why ain't it already been settled?" "Aw, they was a settlement there," I said, "but the Apaches killed some, and Mexican bandits killed some, and about 3 years ago the survivors got to fighting amongst theirselves and just kind of killed each other off." He yanked his beard nervously and said, I don't know. Maybe we'd ought to hunt a more peaceful spot than that there sounds like." "You won't find no peaceful spots west of the Pecos," I assured him. "Say no more about it. I've made up our minds that Bowie Knife Canyon is the place for y'all, and we're going there." "Well, I wouldn't think of arguing the point," he assured me hastily. "What towns does we pass on our way?" "Just one," I said. "War Smoke, right on the Arizona line. Tell your folks to keep out of it. It's a hangout for every kind of a outlaw. I judge your boys ain't handy enough with weapons to mix in sech company." "We don't want no trouble," says he. "I'll tell 'em." So we rolled along, and the journey was pretty uneventful except for the usual mishaps which generally happens to tenderfeet. But we progressed until we was within striking distance of the Arizona border, and there we hit a snag. The rear wagon bogged in a creek we had to cross a few miles north of the line. There'd been a head rise, and the wagons churned the mud, so the last one stuck fast. It was getting on toward sundown, and I told the others to go on and make camp a mile west of War Smoke, and me and the folks in the wagon would foller when we got it out. But that warn't easy. It was mired clean to the hubs, and the mules was up to their bellies. We pried and heaved and hauled, and night was coming on, and finally I said, if I could get them cussed mules out of my way, I might accomplish something. So we unhitched 'em from the wagon, but they was stuck too, and I had to wade out beside 'em and lift 'em out of the mud one by one and tote 'em to the bank. A mule is a helpless critter. But then, with them out of the way, I laid hold of the tongue and hauled the wagon out of the creek in short order. Them Kansas people sure did look surprised. I don't know why. Time we'd scraped the mud off of the wagon and us and hitched up the mules again, it was night, so it was long after dark when we come up to the camp the rest of the train had made in the place I told 'em. Old man Richardson come up to me looking worried, and he says, "Mr. Elkins, some of the boys went into that there town in spite of what I told 'em." "Don't worry," I says. "I'll go get 'em. I clumb on Cap'n Kidd without stopping to eat supper, and rode over to War Smoke, and tied my hoss outside the only saloon they was there. It was a small town and awful